I can't hear anything.
I don't think anybody's doing anything yet, so that's probably why you can't hear anything, whoever said that. I see Rabbi Huber in there.
We're being joined by people on Zoom as we speak. So let's have a seat. We'll try to sort of fill the middle if we can. Or wherever, or by the way, if you have health concerns, don't fill the middle. And let's gather everybody together. We can start.
Nobody can do anything.
Great, good to see you. Okay. So I just want to actually start with something off topic completely. Do I need a mic or am I? You don't need a mic. I don't need a mic. I'm talking for the waiting room and also for the people here. So Freda is here, and Freda is our principal emeritus. I wanted to let you know something which I didn't share with you. We had a bunch of madrichim of teenagers, some of them going off to college, who were here on Sunday, and we said, what would you change about our Hebrew school? And to a person, they said, I've always felt nurtured and at home. And as I go out into the world, I want to thank the Hebrew, and these are some of the students that you had when they were 4 years old and 5 years old that are not. So we're all feeling very old.
Turn my hair
Yeah. And the fact that Freda is here and our former Hebrew school principal, you're sending kids out into the world with a wonderful view, and you played that role also at NCRT as an educator. You've sent, and you're not able to come to. You stay at home and protect yourself, during these difficult times. But since you're here, I wanted to mention.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So this evening we're going to have a conversation about gender fluidity. I don't claim to be an expert, but on our flyer it said "Say ulamad," right? Come out and learn, right? And that's what it says in the Haggadah. That when we don't know something, that better to listen to those who know than to actually for us to jump and make our own impositions on what's going on in the world. The issue of gender fluidity is something that's very, very relevant these days. Legislatures are speaking, families are speaking. We have children, grandchildren who are teaching us a lot about, and I'm just going to keep calling it gender fluidity. So we're very, very privileged that we have with us Gloria Mayrice, who's recently graduated from the College of Charleston in South Carolina, right. Where she studied political science and probably a focus on gender, and she can talk of herself on this in a moment. Also, I want to let you know that I've prepared 16 pages because you're going to have more of a conversation, I think, about societal pronouns and identity. But I want to let you know that this is a Jewish topic, that the Talmud speaks, and I have 16 pages of sources on this, and they're still coming off where it says, we recognize that some people who are born with male characteristics have female souls and vice versa. And that at the beginning of creation, man and woman were together, right? God created man and woman in God's image. Later on, there's a second story about ribs and all that kind of other stuff, but the Torah talks very clearly about the unity of gender. And again, I have 16 pages of sources, and I think, Lori, after, based on what you're going to be speaking about today, that I'm going to be teaching before I leave for Israel, maybe an evening, a 1-hour session on what the Torah, the Talmud, and our commentators say. We're so busy talking about Pesach and kosher and Shabbos and whatever, we forget to talk about some things that are very, very important. So we'll talk about that afterwards. So I just really I'm very, very thrilled. You have a limited time also in the community and with us. So I just want to introduce to Glory May Rice, and thank you very much for joining us this evening.
All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Pride.
Happy
Happy Pride. Thank you. My name is Glory May Rice. If you don't know me already, I use they, them pronouns. And I'm here to guide you through this journey of exploration, learning, growth, and just appreciating the vibrance in the world around us. So this is your LGBTQ crash course, your guide to Pride. All right, so just setting some guidelines. There is no such thing as a stupid question. We're all just learning here. So please feel free to ask a question if you're feeling very inclined, like you need to know this information immediately. You can interrupt me during my explanation. But otherwise, if you're feeling like you just want to hold on to a question, we can get back to it at the end. But any question is a good question. I want to be able to inform you as much as I can, and I don't want to leave you with any really strong senses of confusion. This is a safe space founded on respect, so we all love and respect each other here. That's pretty much a given, which this is why we're here. We're gonna step forward, step back, so taking the space we need to take, and then taking a step back to give other people a chance to speak as well. Because this is going to be a lot of me talking, but also I want to hear your voices and your questions and experiences and everything like that. And this is a place of growth, so we're going to keep welcoming mistakes. That is a big, big part of this growth and learning journey of allowing ourselves to make mistakes and to be imperfect and to be human. The objectives of this, by the end of this session, you will be able to define these terms related to sex and gender, including gender identity and expression, define terms related to sexuality, identify health disparities within LGBTQ people, and respond to young people who come to you with common concerns and questions about gender and sexuality, because the youth are the ones we should be really facilitating and giving love towards as they're now growing and going to be the future of our...
I'm sorry, Glory, can you speak closer to the mic if you want?
Yes, of course. Here, let me bring this closer. All right. Easy fix, no worries. There we go. Right. Alright, sorry for the slight delay. It was there a second ago. I don't know why. Just click later. All right, we're back.
Good job.
All right, so first we're going to start with sex. These are the biological and physiological characteristics that define the binary of male and female. These are assigned at birth. The usual societal conceptions around sex is that it's inherent, but we have just looked at these characteristics and decided to assign these characteristics as male, these characteristics as female. So when we say assigned female at birth, that's what that means, or assigned male at birth, and I will get back to that and what that means later. But sex itself is just the biological assignment. And then there's also intersex, which describes the variety of conditions in which someone is born with biological and physiological traits that don't necessarily fall into the boxes of male and female. This is about as common as natural-born redheads, so about 2% of the population. Intersex people can inhabit a bunch of different types of biological characteristics, so there's not necessarily one type of intersex person, but it is rather common, and one of the biggest forms of sex being also very fluid, where people normally tend to think sex is only male and female, which it's not, and neither is gender. So gender is the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that society considers appropriate for men and women. This is still also perceived as very binary, but we are moving beyond that now as we're realizing that gender can inhabit a multiplicity of expressions. So me personally, I feel very androgynous, leaning towards masculinity. I identify as non-binary, but I still tap into femininity in a lot of ways. I still tap into masculinity in a lot of ways, and I feel very kind of in the middle or outside of it. So gender is just how you feel internally and how you connect to gender, and that can mean a bunch of different things. So that is what gender means, and this is a whole spectrum. It can be anywhere from male to female to agender, moving away from gender entirely, or genderqueer, where you're feeling a mixture of things, or really anywhere on this just color mixture of beauty, and that's how people inhabit gender identity. And then gender expression is how this is expressed outside, and people who identify as a certain gender might express it in a very different way. So there are a lot of cis women who feel very masculine, and a lot of cis men who feel very feminine, or androgynous people who might express really femininely, and so really internally and externally can match up or just be what the person wants to express. So this can encompass clothing, hair, mannerisms, language, behavior, names, communities, anything. This can literally be anything, and it can conform or defy gender norms. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. I don't want to move too quickly.
You said cis, but I don't remember what that is.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's terms that are coming up that,
What is cis?
that I'm not understanding.
So cis is just if you identify with these gender that you were assigned at birth, but I will explain these terms. I'll try not to use too many terms that I haven't gotten to yet. That will be later in the presentation. It's actually right now. So cisgender describes someone who has a gender identity that matches the sex that they were assigned at birth. This is a majority of the world. Many of you in here probably identify as cisgender and don't really know it until right now. But it's just the majority of people who just fit with the sex that they were assigned at birth. And then there's transgender, which describes someone whose gender identity doesn't align with the sex they were assigned at birth. And most people know this by this feeling of gender dysphoria. And dysphoria describes a severe distress or unhappiness caused by the feeling that one's gender identity does not match the being and the body that they see in the mirror. And this can come from facial type of either cheekbones or jawline or chest dysphoria or hip dysphoria or anything like that. It is very rooted within the body rather than in the soul. And so that's why people seek transitioning and gender affirming care. And this is a very big conversation that is happening right now. Gender affirming care describes anything that ranges from hormone replacement therapy, wearable body reshaping accessories, including chest binders or packing gear, anything like that, new haircuts, changing your name and pronouns, and gender affirming / confirming surgeries, whether it be top or bottom surgery. And this is an alternative to using sex change or reassignment surgery because trans people are already that gender within. It's just realigning the body to fit that identity, which is why we call it gender affirming care. And the terms transsexual and transvestite are outdated terms, so we don't really use those anymore. So the correct term would be transgender. And then non-binary describes any gender identity that does not fit within the male-female binary. This is becoming more common for people to express a gender that doesn't really fit within these boxes that we've created and organized for ourselves as a society. And a lot of people usually use the singular version of they, them pronouns, like myself. I will get into pronouns in a second, but a lot of non-binary people use they, them pronouns, but you're not going to meet every non-binary person that you meet might not use they, them. So please do ask. This is why we emphasize it's a spectrum. Everyone has a completely different experience. And you'll find a whole range of people who express themselves in many, many different ways. So just asking name and pronouns is usually the best way to kind of get to know a person and see how they express and how they want to be treated and addressed. So non-binary people identify as gender neutral. It's not necessarily a third gender. It is moving away from gender as a whole, essentially. And other terms can sometimes include agender, genderqueer, gender nonconforming, and many, many more. You don't have to memorize all of these things, but know that non-binary is a very umbrella term. And so I thought this graphic was really fun. These are just some ways that people might relate to the term and the identity of non-binary, whether it's between, on a spectrum, or back and forth, flipping between, on top of it, encompassing both, depending on the weather, a whole bunch of things, little bits and pieces, one of them sometimes, but also very importantly, neither, a different gender entirely, and not even on the same page as gender. This is not a complete, comprehensive list. There are a million ways to encompass and express and connect with gender. And now we're at pronouns. Pronouns are the biggest conversation I think that's happening right now, other than gender affirming care, just because pronouns are how we discuss each other and relate to each other in a social setting. And it can get really confusing sometimes because, one, grammar, and two, making a language shift. And a language shift is never an easy thing to do. Think about every time a new piece of lingo has come into the social scenes and you're like, what does that even mean? Because how are you supposed to keep up with all of this? But we keep shifting, we keep expressing and changing and engulfing everything that comes at us. So pronouns are really, really important right now. And one of the biggest ways we can support and affirm our trans and gender nonconforming family, siblings, friends, everyone. So this is essential for gender affirmation and gender nonconforming folk. Validating one's gender does not stop at pronouns. So using gendered or non-gendered language that applies to their identity is just as important. Gender pronouns can include she, her, hers, for people who identify with more femme identities. He, him, his for people who identify with more masc identities, and then they, them, theirs, which is the gender neutral term. I do recognize that this is usually used in a plural sense, but the singular they, them has been used for a long time. Shakespeare has used it, if that makes it easier to grasp as a long time thing. And it just takes some practice to implement it. So some examples, they are speaking, I listen to them, that backpack is theirs. And then there are also neopronouns that have come up recently. These are even more things. I personally don't know a whole lot of people who'd use neopronouns, but I have seen a lot of people online who have started using these. It's just something to be aware of as we're moving through the world, knowing that there are even more possibilities to address someone. So they, them, theirs, sie, her, hers, sie, they, theirs, they, them, theirs, all of these things. And it's just whatever that person feels makes the most sense to them and how they want to be addressed. And now we're going to get to misgendering. So using someone's name and pronouns is the most affirming way, and not using those name or pronouns is considered misgendering. And addressing a transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming person with the incorrect name and pronouns is considered misgendering, which may cause heightened dysphoria in a lot of trans people. This is why I say asking for name and pronouns first, and using gender-neutral language is the best way to avoid this. The one thing about misgendering is that it can feel extremely disconcerting and invalidating when it does happen to a trans person. When I experience it myself, it feels like a little bit of a jolt, of a shock, like I'm not feeling seen, I'm not feeling heard. But I also know that we're in an environment that is constantly changing, where everyone is at a different place and on a different path. And someone's use of a word that I don't necessarily align with is not going to change my identity. It's not going to make me feel any less than who I am. And this might not be the same for everyone, but most queer people, a lot of queer people know who they are and know that they're going to face constant adversity in the world. So knowing that imperfection is okay and slip-ups are okay, you are not going to instantly reverse someone's identity entirely just by using the wrong pronoun. But respect is a huge, huge part of why we're having these conversations and why we're learning about these pronouns. So just remembering that is a really helpful thing, I think, of knowing everyone's on a different path and we're all just trying to work towards the same thing together, but it might take different steps and different amounts of time for different people. And I also wanted to include some examples of gender-inclusive language because this is also something that we've started talking about recently. So instead of using Mr., Miss, or Mrs., the option for as a gender-neutral prefix is mix, spelled MX. Girl or boy can be changed into person, individual, or human. Stewardess, flight attendant, maid, housekeeper, granddaughter, grandson, grandchild, husband, wife, spouse, or partner, fireman, firefighter, congressman, legislator, freshman, first-year student, upperclassman, third, fourth-year student, and man-made synthetic. So moving away from gender being within our language allows for us to open up a world where everyone is included, and that's pretty much the need for that. So now we're going to get into orientation. Orientation is just how someone identifies based on who they're attracted to. This can be on a scale of romantic or sexual or both or neither, and I will get to that in a second. So these are probably terms that you've heard before. Gay being anyone, but usually men, who are attracted to other men. This is also an umbrella term. Lesbian, who is a woman attracted to other women, but this is also more gender inclusive now, as a lot of genderqueer, non-binary people who were assigned female at birth also use the term lesbian, and also a lot of trans women use the term lesbian. So a lot of these things are very gender expansive and can be applied to a number of groups and identities, because there's no point in making boxes for ourselves when that's the point. We're trying to break out of boxes, which is why we use the term queer, which is an umbrella term for anyone who is not heterosexual or cisgender. And queer in the past has been used as a slur, but just as a lot of marginalized groups have started to reclaim things that were once used against them, so has the queer community, and this is why we use the word queer, because it can encompass a lot of different things. If you're not necessarily comfortable with labels, which I myself am not, queer is a really good thing to identify with, because it's so open and fluid and can be morphed and shifted into whatever you want it to be. A lot of young LGBTQ people have started using the word queer, but other people in the community might consider it offensive, especially if they're older and were living during a time when queer was used against them. So continue to take cues from people and ask what they're comfortable with, and be open to people not liking something that you had previously thought was acceptable for everyone. So just keep listening and keep asking everyone that you encounter. All right, and just as gay and lesbian are also rather binary, bisexual and pansexual allow for fluidity in the middle between gay and heterosexual. So bisexual describes anyone who is attracted to men and women, or a person who is attracted to more than one gender. So people who are bisexual might be attracted to men, women, non-binary people, genderqueer people, and the difference between that and pansexual, who is a person who's attracted to all genders. Pansexual people tend to feel an attraction towards someone regardless of gender, not even thinking of gender as a part of that attraction at all. So my girlfriend is pansexual because she never really felt like gender was a concern within any of her attraction in the past. So these can be applied to people who really just feel attraction to everyone, and these would be considered sexual attraction. And then asexual and aromantic. Asexual is someone who does not experience any sexual desire or attraction to other people. This has to do with sexual orientation, so physical attraction, but this is not celibacy or abstinence. It's not a concern of they haven't found the right person yet. It's not a concern of, oh, you haven't found the right thing for you. It's people who genuinely do not feel that sexual attraction, and while this isn't as visible as a lot of other queer identities are, it still exists in the world. And so does the aromantic identity, who is, aromantic people do not experience romantic desire. Or aromantic people may or may not be asexual. They might go hand in hand, they might not. But it's just someone who just doesn't feel any romantic attraction. All right, and so now we're going to get into some of these health disparities, disparities within school, discrimination LGBTQ people face. I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen a lot of the anti-LGBTQ and anti-trans hate, violence legislation, especially on the news, on social media, literally everywhere. It is extremely, extremely rampant right now. And this is why we're having these conversations. You might ask yourself, why do we have to celebrate Pride? Why do we have to talk about this? Why does it have to be so in our faces? And it's because of all of this hate and adversity that we face all the time, especially right now. Legislation is a huge deal because it has the ability to take away rights from people and to not give people access and resources that are essential to life-saving procedures and practices, rather than just slurs and discrimination. This is real political movements. So this is why we're having these conversations, and this is why it's so in our faces, because it has to be. If it's not, then we're not going to move anywhere. We're not going to teach people that accepting others, regardless of whether you understand it or not, is okay, and that humans are humans and we're allowed to be fluid, because it really doesn't change that much about who we are. You can live and love whoever you want, and it's not going to give the neighbor termites. Like, that's not gonna happen. So this is why we're here. This is why we talk about this. And unfortunately, disparities are an extremely huge part of LGBTQ people's lives, and an unfortunate part that we do have to learn about and talk about. If we're not having hard conversations, then we are not learning. So some of these disparities are within health insurance. LGBTQ people are more likely to be homeless. There are higher rates of tobacco, alcohol, and drug use. Lesbians are less likely to get preventative services for cancer. Trans individuals are at a higher risk for HIV and STDs, victimization, mental health issues, and suicide. The CDC says from 2015, young gay and bisexual males have disproportionately higher rates of HIV, syphilis, and other sexually transmitted diseases. And adolescent lesbian and bisexual females are more likely to have ever been pregnant than their heterosexual peers. And elderly LGBTQ individuals face barriers to health because of isolation, lack of social services, and culturally competent providers. And you also have to be aware that LGBTQ people of color face these things at even higher rates, and this is a huge portion of our population. So when we're meeting this, we have to meet it with an intersectional view. Intersectionality just means looking at issues that might overlap within a bunch of different identities, whether that be race, gender, sexuality, religion, ethnicity, country of origin, anything like that. So noticing that people who are marginalized in multiple of those groups and inhabit multiple of those groups will face even more discrimination based on that. And then LGBTQ disparities at school. Due to feeling unsafe or uncomfortable, nearly a third missed at least one day of school in the last month. Nearly 2 in 3 experienced LGBTQ-related discrimination at school. Lower GPAs, lower self-esteem, and higher levels of depression. Over 8 in 10 experienced verbal harassment based on a personal characteristic. Around 45% avoided bathrooms and locker rooms. And LGBTQ people who experienced high levels of victimization were twice as likely to report that they do not plan to pursue post-secondary education. I really liked what you said, Marcia, that these things are not because of who queer people are, but rather how the world is set up around them and how they are met with resistance and hate as they're moving through the world. So giving queer people, and especially queer youth in school, resources to feel supported, to feel loved and understood, can make a huge, huge difference in how queer people then move through the world feeling good and solid and valuable within themselves. And so here we're going to get to some questions about what do you do if a young person comes out to you? How should I respond? The first thing to do is accept, accept, accept. Radical acceptance can make an incredibly big difference in how a young person feels when they're coming out, whether or not you understand how they're feeling, what their experience is, or what their identity is. Just saying, I hear you, I see you, and you're valid and loved is enough to just set that person absolutely free. And so recognizing that this was probably a really hard decision for them, and that there is a certain level of trust there that had to be established first, and that is an incredible part of that connection in that relationship. Each youth will have different feelings, ranging from shame to acceptance to pride. So they might meet you with many different emotions, and to just be prepared for whatever emotions arise, and that being just as valid as any other emotion that might arise at the same time. You should let them know that you're probably still learning, and ask for their patience. I've said to a lot of people, you know, I had 21 years, probably less, but still somewhere between 15 and 21 years to learn about myself, and to learn about queerness and sexuality and gender identity, and then to come out to someone and be like, hey, this is who I am, I need you to accept this and understand this instantly. It's a really unrealistic expectation, to think that someone can pick up all this stuff that you've got to explore for years and years of your life within seconds. So this is why we're continuously learning and accepting and finding out different ways to talk about gender and sexuality. And then also ask who else they've come out to, and whether they want you to keep it in confidence, because you don't want to out them to anyone. Outing someone can be extremely scary and dangerous, because you might be putting that person in harm's way. So know how to ask, who else have you told? Who do you want me to share this information with? How do you want me to talk about this is extremely important. And then asking what words and actions will most affirm them, whether it be gendered language, name, pronouns, activities they're involved in, anything like that, clothing, haircuts, what will make them feel most themselves. And then what to do if a young person tells you that they're questioning their sexuality and don't really know where they fit in yet, or how they're feeling. You can affirm that questioning aspects of their identity is a completely normal thing to do, a completely normal part of life. Just as we question what job we want, or like where we're going to live, you know, we can question things within ourselves as well, and this is completely normal. And you can ask values-neutral, open-ended questions like, how do you see yourself in the future? What does being a part of this community mean to you? How do you connect with gender? How do you connect with sexuality? Tell me more about that. Tell me how you're feeling. Just listening and giving them a space to just express however they're feeling, regardless of what space or what path they're on. And also let them know that it's okay to change their mind at any point about their identity throughout their lifetime. Humans have agency within gender and sexuality, meaning that at any point in our lifetime, you can realize that, oh, I actually connect with this thing. And actually, this thing that I connected with before, I don't necessarily connect with anymore. Because we're talking about gender fluidity and sexual fluidity. These things are on a spectrum and fluid, so it's okay to have a new realization at any point in our lives. And then how do we treat transgender youth? We treat them just like any other young person. You ask for their pronouns, ask for their name, you realize how they like to express themselves, and take that into loving consideration, and notice that transitioning can look different for each young person, whether they want to do that medically, socially, physically, non-physically, however they experience it. This can be extremely different for every person. And then I put together this list of resources and organizations that do a lot of work for queer liberation, for queer suicide prevention, advocacy, anything like that. So if you guys want to take a photo of this, then please feel free to do that. PFLAG, here I'll go through all the acronyms. Queer people love an acronym. PFLAG is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. TSER is Trans Student Education something. And then I'm realizing that I don't know all of these. Listen is a great organization. I don't know what it stands for. GLAD is the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. GSA is just Genders and Sexualities Alliance. You might also hear it as Gay Straight Alliance, but we use Genders and Sexuality Alliance now because it's more inclusive of all identities. HRC is the Human Rights Campaign, one of the biggest advocacy organizations nationally. There are some Human Rights Campaign stickers over there. They're the blue ones with the yellow equal sign, so you might see them on a bunch of people's cars or in their offices or anything like that. And then I threw Keshet up there because that is the biggest Jewish queer organization. Keshet means rainbow in Hebrew. And they have a whole bunch of resources online for Jewish queer people, youth, friends, family, everyone. You can find a whole bunch of stuff on there. I love Keshet. They have a list of Jewish values that have to do with queer acceptance and queer liberation that I love to share everywhere I go.
Lesson is the Educators Network.
Which one?
Lesson is
Listen
the
is
Educators Network. That's
Educators Network.
largest, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is not a comprehensive list, but I really like all of these organizations. And then there are also a ton more on a local, like grassroots level. So you'll find little itty bitty queer organizations wherever you go. And you guys can be educators too. I mean, now that you have hopefully kind of internalized and processed some of this information, you guys can absolutely be ambassadors and allies to the queer community and spread this information wherever you go. Explain to people, hey, this is what this means, or maybe we should use this kind of language, or oh, this is this person's pronouns, try using this. And your learning journey doesn't also have to end here. This is Pride Month. We're in the middle of Pride Month now. But Pride should really be all year, every year. And we are continuously learning and adapting and changing as we do as humans. Change is a huge, huge theme just within humanity. And then also you don't have to understand everything to accept it. Like I said before, you know, I don't necessarily understand physics or astrophysics or metaphysics or quantum physics, but I know that they exist, and I know that it's real, and I know that it's an important part of our lives. So just knowing that understanding doesn't necessarily have to match up exactly with acceptance. And thank you all for listening.
So I'm just jumping for a second. I just want to do a protocol thing, if I can. So Gloria, thank you. I think we're going to questions in a second. I just want to do some protocol things for a moment. Joining us from Las Vegas is a former classmate and colleague. You can't see because of the connection guide there, but we're joined by Rabah Rona Matlow, who speaks on this topic from, so I just want to welcome my colleague, Rabah, you're still there. By the way, notice that the pronoun that Rabah Rona wishes to go by, rabbi, is like going to Israel and me being called Dude Irwin. But when you put it ahead, it's a, and I just want to also recognize Counselor Marcia Silverman and also Ellie Waslow? Waska, and you are the head of GSA, which is?
Genders and Sexualities Alliance through the high school.
Through the high school. So I just want to do some protocol things, and then we'll turn it back to you. And thank you, Gloria, and we'll open, I guess, you got people for questions.
Yeah, first I do want to call up Ellie, just to talk about the GSA at Glen Cove High School here. The GSA at Glen Cove High School is something that I started when I was a senior. I wanted to give the queer freshmen, sophomores, whatever, all the young people, just a chance to feel connected and to feel something, because I didn't have that when I was there. And then I wanted to plant that seed, and now we have that seed growing into an ayahuasca. So,
Hello, so my name is Ellie Waska, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently president of the high school's GSA, which is the Genders and Sexualities Alliance. This is a group that is dedicated to creating a positive change in our school district. We meet about once a week and we discuss the do's and things in our schools and our own personal journeys of self-discovery. Having this kind of group creates a safe space within our district and our schools for people to come and talk about their experiences as a part of the queer community or as an ally to the queer community. One thing we often discuss is how much has changed over the years. And the queer community is so much more accepted in society and through schools. It's amazing to see how society grows and changes with the times. While we have made immense strides, there's still so much work to do, and it starts with educating ourselves and what the community is, what they do, and what they fight for, which is why events like this are so important. Being in GSA, we've been able to accomplish so many great things, including talking to students about taking students to their first Pride Parade last year, meeting with the LGBTQ Community Center in Hauppauge, speaking to faculty about proper usage of pronouns, and even organizing a Pride-themed Spirit Week, which is this week at school. Also, a huge thank you to our coordinator, Goldapper, who's been running the GSA for the past 2 years. He has been the person behind so many different events and activities for us, so a huge thank you to him. The city of Glen Cove is so loving and accepting, and nothing would be possible without the love and support of the community, so thank you.
Thank you.
all right, so I know that a lot of this information is probably extremely overwhelming. So if anyone has any questions or wants me to go back to a slide that they want to focus on more, or any stories or experiences they would like to share, this would be your time. Yeah.
Alright, how do you know, how do you know the person, if like, when I meet somebody and I know that, like, I don't wanna think like, oh, I know that they're a woman automatically, but, like, I'll look at Fred and I think she's a woman, but I don't know, so how do you know?
Yeah, so assumptions can be a really tricky thing. We know the list of stereotypes that go along with male, female, trans, non-binary, but stereotypes, as we have come to learn, don't necessarily apply to everyone. So really it's just best to ask, what are your pronouns? And if they feel comfortable sharing, what do you identify with?
To everybody I meet in the world? Or just people?
May I? I was at the store a couple of weeks ago, and the person at the register, the cashier, I noticed that I wasn't sure is that a man, a woman. I said, so I asked. I don't know if it was. I think it was with Tammy. I said, Tammy, is that a? And she said, why do you care?
Yeah, and also.
But no, I wouldn't wanna be disrespectful if they,
Yeah.
you know,
So if
I don't care.
that person's identity and gender don't necessarily factor into the, I guess, conversation or situation that you're in, then really it doesn't necessarily have to be explored. But if you're wondering, oh, how do I address this person? How am I supposed to know how to communicate with this person? Just asking for pronouns, hey, what are your pronouns, is the easiest and most affirming way, and gentle and not like jarring and invasive way of asking what that means. So not a lot of people, when I'm out on the street or in the supermarket or at my job or anything like that, will ask, what are your pronouns? And so a lot of people will assume that I use she, her pronouns. But then when people ask, I get to share, hey, I use they, them pronouns because I'm non-binary. And then they will continue to respect that. So just asking, what are your pronouns, is really easy, and most people either will understand that or won't, and you'll say, explain, just as you learned today. Yes?
Are there, as a parent or a grandparent, are there any cues that are common to young children that are questioning their sexuality, their person, like, from your experience, maybe Ellie, you can help. Were there things that, that were telltale that you, in other words, as a mother, what can I say to help bring that out, that fear of, coming out?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To make that easier, to even coax it out. Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
I do. So for the people on Zoom, the question is about what cues children might give that they're questioning their sexuality or gender, and how best to facilitate that exploration and that journey of acceptance and coming out. And to that I would say, it's hard to know. It really is, because everyone has a very different experience. I know for me, throughout my childhood, I always felt like when I was dressing very feminine and doing very feminine things that it was very forced. I didn't necessarily express that all the time, verbally or physically, but I felt it internally. And then especially during puberty, it all felt wildly uncomfortable and even terrifying, to a point of keeping me up at night and me putting on multiple training binders, training bras at the same time, just because I was so scared of my chest growing. And now I know why. But at the time I had no idea, and I didn't share that. And so just giving your child a space to explore and giving them the opportunity to explore different possibilities of just knowing that there are multiple genders and multiple sexualities, because I just didn't know that that was an option for me. I didn't know that my experience was aligned with something that people experience regularly. But also, there's no way to essentially coax it out other than giving them resources, but everyone has their own journey and they need to take that on their own. You should not force anyone to come out. You should not force anyone to explore something they don't want to explore. But just giving them the option and the knowledge and the comfort that they are free and able to explore those things within the home, at least, is a really safe way to do that.
So I just want to say thank you for making me feel more comfortable, to make myself a better receptacle for someone, a safe place for people or anyone that I could understand and be a safe place for them. So thank you very much.
Someone, I celebrate Pride in the office, and somebody yesterday said, I was talking about how important it is to support youth who are having gender questioning, as before puberty, during puberty, or whenever. And that's why we need to have, I said, that's why we should have books in the children's section in the library that allow a kid to identify with something in that book. And their position was that, well, it gives them ideas to be queer. So how do you, I think it's ridiculous, but maybe it's not.
So that tends to be most people's opinion about books, about queerness, sexuality, gender, especially within schools, within children's sections and libraries, that it's going to be indoctrinating them or grooming them, or the books are going to make them gay. I read a book about animals. Do I look like a cat? It's the same thing. Learning information does not make you that information. And giving people resources to know, oh, these things exist in the world, rather than silencing those existences and silencing those people and those experiences, allowing people to know these things are real and normal and not risque. They're not hypersexual. They're not going to sexually assault your child. The proposition that queer people are inherently hypersexual and predatory and all of these things are totally, totally wrong and really quite disturbing and disgusting as a queer person to hear. Because I'm not a predator. I don't know any queer people who are preying on children. And so really that's pretty much it. Like a book is a book, a book is information,
Good answer.
not indoctrination. Yes.
There's a great quote that's been making its way through Facebook, and I'll paraphrase it, but this is pretty close. If a parent wants to ban a book for their own child, that's okay, but a parent does not have a right to ban books for other children.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to repeat that for the people on Zoom if you didn't hear that. A parent does have the right to ban a book for their own child, but not the right to ban books for other people's children, because parents should have the ability to give their children the information that they need, and know what's best for their children, but also listening to your own children and knowing that a lot of children know what's best for themselves as well is really important, because children have agency. Children are people, not objects that we control and own. So, yeah. Anyone else? Questions? Comments? Yeah.
I wanted to say something about the use of they, them. We use they, them as a singular when we don't know the gender of a person.
Yes.
So like people, when they hear that, they're very confused. I was too initially. You know, like, oh, that's a plural, that's plural. It doesn't make sense. But when you, like, if something belongs to someone that you don't know who they are, we actually do use they, them in the singular.
Yeah.
So once you start practicing it and start listening for it, then you realize that it actually is grammatically correct.
Yes, it is incredibly common in our language, and we just don't notice it because we haven't put focus on it. The only time we do put focus on it is when we're talking about queer people, and that is the biggest issue. Like if someone was coming to pick me up, and someone else saw that there was a car outside for me, they would probably say, hey, there's someone here to pick you up, they're in a black car.
Exactly.
And it's just easy as that. And a lot of people who meet they, them pronouns with opposition saying that's not grammatically correct, well, if you're putting grammatical correctness before respecting someone and their identity, then you might have to do some relearning and rethinking. You might have to take a step back and say, hey, why do I think that grammar is more important than a person feeling safe, validated, and respected and loved? Any other questions? Any slides that we want to go back to? Are there questions on Zoom?
This is Rob Matlow. Can I add a couple of comments real quick?
Yeah.
Thank you. So just a couple things. I use Z here pronouns. First of all, I identify as gender punk, which is about breaking preconceived notions. And so when I teach anything, I like to start with Bereshit, with Genesis chapter 1, and break preconceived notions there. A couple other things I'd like to point out. Some of you may have seen the memes floating around of a pallet of bricks and the caption, some new Pride merchandise has just dropped. And the point of that meme is that Pride is not about commercialism. Pride isn't about parades. Pride is about the original Stonewall riots, which started with the Zazu, who was one of the original Black queer women throwing rocks at NYPD because they were oppressing the Black trans women and queer women at the Stonewall Inn in New York City. So a little mini history lesson there. So a couple other things real quick. I'm a published author and scholar on all these issues, and Rabbi and Freda Klopfer have my contact information. So if anybody has questions about any of these things, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk to any of you about any of this stuff. Thank you for the presentation this evening. Really appreciate your time and effort preparing it.
No course, thank you.
I'm just going to dovetail on what Rabbi Rona said. So we're going to continue with the questions, and by the way, we have rainbow-colored cookies and all kinds of good stuff. I always say that a conversation is a conversation. When someone comes and talks about these topics, it becomes a uniquely Jewish conversation when we can refer back to the texts and the Jewish texts and history of the Torah, our scholars. And I said earlier when I began that this is actually a Jewish conversation because the Torah, the Talmud, and all of our commentators talk about gender, I'm just going to use that word, gender fluidity. And again, I made 12 copies of biblical quotes and rabbinical quotes on this very topic. We in Judaism, we're so busy, we kind of keep things very narrow. You know, Rosh Hashanah, Pesach, Hanukkah, you know, all that stuff, we keep it narrow. But this topic is very, very wide in Jewish context. We just don't talk about it a lot. And Rabbi, you and I are, you don't know it yet, but you and I are going to be doing a session that's a follow-up to this on Judaism and this topic to expand on what you brought to us. So again,
I was about to text you about that, Rabbi.
Sorry, Rona?
I said I was just about to text you and offer my help when you make that presentation.
Well, you got it. Okay, yeah.
I'd like to follow up to that. Those of you, I'm Freda Klopper, and I have I'll take my mask off, grandson. And a friend of mine, Anita Edelman, is on, and I've already been in touch with Rabbi Arona and the cantor and the rabbi I had met, and I had a conversation with Lori, and I hope to grab Ellie afterwards. But our plan is, after, the rabbi might do something now, but after the holidays, we are going to start some sort of a Zoom group, because that way we get, because of the fact that I have a transgender grandchild, and the same thing with my friend Anita, people tend to call us, and there are so many questions, and this was fantastic. So I've already spoken to Rabbi Rona, and she's going to help, and we're going to FaceTime, and we're looking for resources, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but it is also going to be through a Jewish lens. And there was a wonderful article in the New York Times, where actually how this started several months ago. It was written by a non-binary Orthodox rabbi. And what they talked about was all the different things the rabbi has on the handout. My impression had always been that Judaism was, particularly Orthodox Judaism, was anti. But there are so many references, and there is a lot going on in the Orthodox community. There was just something in the forward about somebody that feels, how can they become part of mainstream Judaism? And there are organizations. So this is really to be continued, the rabbi and Rabbi Rona, but we do plan to do something on a wider scale after the holidays. And if anybody is interested, all they have to do is let us know, because this is so incredibly important. We know what's happening in our country, and I keep saying my grandson lives in a bubble in Amherst, Massachusetts. He is very, very lucky. He has accepting parents. They have wonderful health insurance. Actually, as a side story, my grandson goes to Hampshire College, and they have, which is near, right near Amherst, and their family has taken in a young man, a trans male, whose family has cut him off, and so they have taken him in. And, so we hear the good stories, we see glory, but there are so many sad stories of children whose parents and community, we know that the rate of suicide is very high, and it breaks my heart when I read in the newspaper what's happening all over our country. And, I say to myself, what can I do? But there's that wonderful quote, what is it, from Tirkei Avot, You are not free, you don't have to complete the journey, but nor are you free from taking the first step. So I am very grateful to the cantor and to the rabbi and to Rabbi Rona and to you, my dear, who we will be in touch, and to my friend Anita, who is going to, help me with this, because this is so incredibly important to get this information out. And the issue you brought today, when Rabbi Rona and I spoke, that is really the quintessential, essential question in beginning is, what does all this mean? So I thank you so much for what you are doing and what you are going to help us continue to do.
So,
I just want to mention something that when I do a wedding now, I used to say, one of the 7 bracha, the 7 blessings, is thank you God, the creator of man and woman. And since the cantor and I presided at a same gender wedding, I can't say that anymore. And so I always say the creator of sacred partners. So, and by the way, there's another one, postman is now letter carrier, just
Postal carrier, yeah.
yeah. So,
Rabbi,
we're gonna keep this open and keep it, sorry?
Rabbi has her hand raised, so if you just.
Rona, yeah, Rabbi.
okay, thank you. Yeah, so, yeah, as Freda mentioned news, my memory just got jogged about a couple of things. This morning, the Human Rights Campaign declared a nationwide state of emergency for LGBTQ plus people across the country because we are under siege by right-wing extremists. Even though it's only certain states that are acting really badly, across all states, there are parts of the states that are also acting out of control because of the extremists in particular counties or whatever. And so every state is considered a danger zone in the US right now. And so it's considered to be, under siege, basically. On the flip side of that, there was a little bit of good news that I saw a few minutes ago. A federal court overturned Florida legislation signed by Governor DeSantis saying that gender identity is real and that children seeking gender affirming therapies could pursue that in Florida.
Thank you. So Gloria, if you could, you have some just some additional resource things, and I just want to close with a Talmudic quote. I can't think of
yeah. Just wanted to wrap it out.
Yeah, and also going off of what Rona said, a federal judge also did just rule that the Tennessee drag ban is also unconstitutional. So that's another win.
Yeah.
So we're gonna keep counting our wins. Does anyone else have any last minute?
Just the colors of the flag.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of flags and resources, flyers, things you can put up in your home, in your office, in wherever you go, to say that you support everything and everyone, and then also just resources to read about, to keep learning, a whole bunch of things over there, buttons, stickers, everything, and these flags. And so this is the pride flag. You can see that there are multiple up here. These encompass all of the identities that I did talk about today, which I did put them next to some of the things. And if you're interested in learning about more about pride flags, that's easy to Google. But this is the progressive pride flag, which you're seeing the normal rainbow, formulated by Gilbert Baker, by Harvey Milk. And then Philadelphia added these stripes over here to recognize the heightened disparities and discrimination that trans people face, which is the white, the pink, and the blue. And then also black and brown communities as well on top of that. So this encompasses and highlights everyone, especially those who face the most amount of hate within the queer community. So this is why we have these little flags that you can take home and play with and share with everyone. So those are all those resources over there. Go and explore those, read them, take them home, pass them around, whatever you want to do with them. Thank you all so much for being here. This is a rite and a journey, a celebration, a party, a really scary time. Let contradiction exist. Contradiction is not a bad thing. It's not something that we should be scared of. If you're confused and say, that doesn't make sense, let it not make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. We are people. We are vibrant. We don't make sense. We're everywhere. We're nowhere at the same time. And just keep loving each other so much.
So I'm going to close with this. And by the way, Gloria, I've heard just somewhere that there's room in the rabbinate for scholars like you and for advocates like you. So just in case. So there is a saying, and it deals with diversity in the Talmud, which says, "Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim." These words and those words are both the words of the living God. So I'm going to adapt that and say that this love and that love are both loves of the loving God. And we'll close with that. And I just want to mention also, just while we have an audience here, this Sunday we are honoring our caretaker couple. And if you haven't bought your ticket or you wish to put an ad in the journal, just Leslie is back there, and please.
I didn't ask him to do that.
But she would give me heck if I didn't. But thank you very much, and just talk to Leslie afterwards. And Glory, thank you so much. Look, we came here on the understanding, let's come and learn. I learned a lot. Just very helpful to all of us. So let's keep the conversation going over coffee. And Erev Tov, everyone. Thank you very much.